Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to round number 4 here in Mundelein, Illinois. I'm Matt Bamonte, the NRG series here. We're off to a great start so far. So just a quick check-in on some of our players to watch here. So I have, we watched Sam Black play earlier, as well as Jesse Robkin. Will Kowalczyk also checking in at 3-0 as we get moving through about basically the halfway portion throughout the day here. Looks like the players are about ready to roll in the feature match area. So I'm going to send it back down to Mason. He's got a new friend with him in the booth. So you guys settle in and check out round number 4 as we continue through our day here in Mundelein.
Hello, everyone, and we are back here with round number 4 of the Mundelein Pioneer 10K. I'm joined by Doomwake Devin O'Donnell. Devin, you excited for some Pioneer? You're hopping in midday here.
Hey, that's me. I am excited to play. I was excited to play some Pioneer, but I'm also excited to watch some Pioneer. We got a pretty interesting matchup here. No mono green decks in sight, which I think you told me earlier that you haven't seen any green decks on camera all tournaments so far, which is pretty good. We got some Bant Company and some Atarka Red, though. This is maybe some stuff we haven't seen before.
Yeah, we have not. We have seen different decks except Phoenix every single round. That's been the only overlap we've had. As it looks like Mason tricked us. He named his deck Atarka Red. I didn't even notice until just now. Looks like he's actually playing Greasefang. We will update that in a second. I'm going to say it, Devin. It hurts to have a fellow Mason do that. I was about to say no commentary bias, but I'm excited for a Mason to take down this match. But we do see Mason here casting Thoughtseize, and Robert just has all lands and a Thalia. So Thalia is getting taken as we do have this Lovestruck Beast on an adventure.
Yeah, Thoughtseize is pretty good against the 2-spell 5-land hand. I just wanted to point out, I think for future tournaments, if people mislabel their deck, they should be automatically disqualified. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I think we should just be allowed to make fun of them. You know, we're not like, we're trying to be nice or whatever, but I should just be allowed to like ruthlessly rip into them. You know, like if I see a mistake, I just get to go in. But know, Mason here, unfortunately, took the low road as it was and decided to be a comedian. But enough about that in the medium jokes. Let's see how the gameplay goes. As we did draw a Scavenging Ooze off the top for Robert, which feels like justice for misnaming our deck Atarka Red.
Yeah, that is. I would have to imagine that's Robert's likely best best draw step in the entire deck there. And if you take a look at the Atarka Red deck list, you'll notice that most of the Greasefang decks, and this one included, don't actually have a way to remove a Scavenging Ooze from the battlefield in Game 1 situations. Their removal spells that they're going with are 2 Witherbloom Command. I guess that's not true. There's 2 Sky Sovereigns if you just naturally draw that. But yeah, outside of Sky Sovereign, there's really no way to get this Ooze off the battlefield. So Mason might have to play Mason might have to play this on hard mode.
Yeah, and it looks like, spoilers, Robert hand all lands. He's going to make his land drops. Looks like almost all of his lands in his deck are base green. And so, Mason has to somehow go for the Greasefang thing and prevent enough pressure and somehow kill the Scavenging Ooze and stop Robert here from growing the Skoos all at the same time. But if he can do that, he can win.
Yeah, and we see a Greasefang here for Mason. We're going to go ahead and eat the boat. I guess the saving grace for Mason is that there aren't any creatures in the graveyard, so the Ooze can't grow.
So there's Robert's Thalia.
Pretty small Ooze. There is Robert's Thalia, that is true. So we can make it a 3-3. But won't be able to block the Greasefang profitably. And I mean, as long as Robert just keeps, not finding spells, then maybe this Greasefang can just try and erase. There was the Lovestruck Beast, so I wonder why we didn't cast that.
Yeah, I wonder if Roberts just has a lot of respect for Grizzly Salvage hitting 2 or 3 things. Just thinks, hey, my hand's all lands. I'll find time for the Lovestruck Beast. I just don't want you to Grizzly Salvage and just basically hit like 3 or 4 vehicles and I lose.
Yeah, maybe also wanted to bluff a company. Maybe, potentially Mason doesn't attack with the Greasefang. But we do see an attack here, a Blooming Marsh, and I can't quite get a good look at Mason's hand, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of action there. There's no spells being played on 3 mana here, so...
I think both players are on mono lands right now. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to get my eagle eye vision going, but it's a little hard to see. And Robert's picked up the Coco now, so now it's actual 4-mana, nothing to do. But yeah,
last turn we attacked, didn't have it, so you would assume that Mason's just gonna attack again. Well, now I actually have it, so
yeah. And it's a really funny spot, too, from Mason's side where it's like, well, I've got to attack. I can't stop this from happening. And once I attack, I can't even punish you by filling the graveyard because I've already moved to combat. So it's really kind of the perfect kind of trap that Robert's laid here.
Right, and Mason at this point is so far behind that, like you said, he just can't afford to not attack here. Like it has nothing else going on. The Scavenging Ooze is checking the Greasefang's ability, so just kind of has to hope that this Coco hits 6 lands. Which I've done that before. I don't know if you have, but
Yeah, I've done it once or twice to say the least. But yeah, I mean, Robert here, I think hit double hits. I just don't know if they're bigger than the Greasefang.
yeah, you could double block. I'm probably just inclined to just take this.
Yeah, maybe start a little race. I guess if you double block, you outgrow the Sky Sovereign when it comes to the Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, because you're putting 3 creatures in the graveyard. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
kind
don't
of
hate
a
that.
tricky spot. Although I guess...
See what...
Huh. Interesting.
You'll have to see what Mason has for leftovers, because, Mason didn't do anything on 3 mana last turn, played a tap land, might have land boat here, and, that could be a really big punish here for Robert. Now, there's only 2 copies, I believe, 2 copies of Sky Sovereign in Mason's deck list, and one's already exiled, so not that likely, but, if there is an untapped land and a Sky Sovereign here, Mason might be right back in this game.
100%, yeah, and we do see Robert here, because he hit the Archon, even if we did have the Sky Sovereign, it had to be a basic. Everything else is going to enter tap. So, it looks like we have Boseiju too for Robert. So even if the Scooze does end up dying, we're actually kind of, getting really close to just not even having it matter. As I think we're flooding out still, like just only the Boseiju, but we do have Lovestruck Beast too. So looks like we're holding on that one to cast and maybe bluff another Collected Company.
Yeah, I do believe Robert's on all lands, so I feel like that might have been a good turn for the Lovestruck Beast, but looks like a Pathway and a Boseiju left over. See a Satyr Wayfinder milling over a Chariot, but we know that one's not good because of the Scavenging Ooze. Picks up a land here, and most likely does not have the Sky Sovereign, because I feel like that probably would have been a good opportunity to deploy that.
Well, yeah, you can only play 1 spell a turn thanks to the Archon. So that's it for Mason. He needed to hit, something Loco Doco off that Satyr Wayfinder. Unfortunately, did not. And this is kind of the benefit too of like Robert's deck, right? Is the Bant Company deck has these weird creatures.
Right, and as we talked about, Mason just doesn't have any removal spells in his main deck. Like, there's no Fatal Pushes, no Abrupt Decays, none of that stuff. So, these creatures are somewhat problematic for Mason, and he just can't remove them from the battlefield, especially in Game 1 situations.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And looks like it's getting pretty bad news bears out here if you're a Mason fan, because we've got a bigger and bigger board, and the Scavenging Ooze is officially out of Sky Sovereign range.
As a Mason yourself, are you rooting for Mason here, or
not if we had labeled our deck correctly? Incorrectly, I mean, sorry. Ever since joining coverage, it exacerbated it more for me. Where before it was just frustrating, and now it's just really frustrating. Which doesn't seem like much, but I'm a little petty sometimes.
We got a Rhonas here, and that should be lethal. Yeah, pump up the Archon, and that is game number 1 going to Robert.
Yeah, and I think this really shows one of the strengths of the Bant Company deck, which is very different than Bant Spirits, despite seeming like they'd be a kind of similar deck. And we do see some cards overlapping here, but really what Robert's bringing to the table, I feel like, is this disruptive Bant deck that kind of gets cards like Collected Company go over the top and sort of just interacts with the opponent along the way and does their best on messing them up as they go, and then kind of has, some reasonable sideboard cards to back up these reasonable creatures.
Right, yeah, and that was Robert's hand was not very good. Kept Thalia, Lovestruck Beast, 5 lands, but drew the Scavenging Ooze, as the classic Thoughtseize bug goes. And that once the Scavenging Ooze was drawn, that was pretty much the game right there. We both said that there's no outs in Mason's deck list to the Scavenging Ooze game 1, but that's probably going to change in the post-board game. So we'll have to see how those go. Yeah,
and let's take a second here and take a look at the sideboard games, because I would love to see and hear what your opinions are. Let's start with the Bant deck. I'll read off the cards here for you real quick. We got 4 Spell Queller, 3 Brutal Cathar, 2 Extraction Specialists, 2 Rest in Peace, 1 Outland Liberator, 1 Skyclave Apparition, 1 Voice of Resurgence, and 1 Yashar. And Devin, what do you like from this pile?
So give me the rest in pieces. Those are pretty easy. Spell Queller's an interesting sideboard card. I wonder if that's kind of like a play draw thing where you want them on the play but not on the draw. Given that we're on the draw, probably not the Spell Quellers. The Skyclave's kind of mid because most of the Greasefang, like if you play Greasefang, you're going to get immediate value out of it. So I'm not really into that kind of stuff. Same with Brutal Cathar. And then maybe the Outland Liberator to kind of break up a Greasefang start. So, I mean, really from my eyes, just the Liberator and the rest in pieces. And I think that's all I want.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like, you don't want to change up things too much. And with a Coco deck, you don't want to over sideboard. You don't want to bring in too many things that aren't creatures as well. You want to make sure your main game plan's still working. Speaking of still working, let's see if Mason has some cards to make his deck actually work in the face of all this disruption from the Bant deck here from Robert. Mason's sideboard is 3 Abrupt Decay, 3 Fatal Push, 2 Duress, 2 Liliana the Veil, 2 Unlicensed Hearse, 1 Boseiju who endures, 1 Lawrence Escape, which I'm sure we all know. I don't need to read for us all in a second, and 1 Cameo Safekeeping. Lawrence Escape, if you don't know, is white. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Scry 1.
Yeah, I know what that card did. I had 3 in my last draft deck. I don't know if it's necessarily that good to have 3 of them, but in any case, I want to get the Fatal Pushes and the Abrupt Decays in here. We talked about the Scavenging Oozes and how we didn't really have a way to remove them from the battlefield in game 1. So I want the Pushes, I want the Abrupt Decays, and I think after that, you could maybe talk yourself into something like Duress for Company, but there's just very, very few hits outside of Company, so I don't think you want to go there. But yeah, outside of the removal spells, I think that's pretty much it. I'm not really into the protection spells here.
Yeah, that feels like much more of a thing where, like, if your opponent's going to interact a bunch, you maybe, like, forces your hand into it. But here, you really just kind of got to do your thing and make sure it doesn't get disrupted too much by all these creatures. So I like where your head's at on the sideboarding there. Makes a lot of sense to me. How do you feel about this matchup normally goes? Because like you kind of mentioned, we kept it kind of a loosey-goosey in game 1. We ripped the scoos, and that was kind of all she wrote. Does that feel like how the games are normally going to go? Who do you think is normally favored if we play this match 100 times?
I would say that the Company deck is a favorite in game 1 because of the Scavenging Oozes, because of the problematic creatures that, it makes it really hard for Mason to be able to go off through those creatures, and there's no removal spells. But I think the texture of the games are going to change a lot in the post-board scenarios when we have the Abrupt Decays, we have the Fatal Pushes, we can, actually interact with creatures in the battlefield that are going to stop us from comboing, and then also even have the Abrupt Decays to answer the rest in pieces as well.
Makes sense to me as we see Mason with a Temple Garden and a passing of the turn. Into a Temple Garden from Robert. Not to be outdone. Does look like he has an elf, though, to back it up, kind of getting ahead.
Yeah, both players with Temple Garden Tribal here. And see if Mason has an ideal start here. You want to have the Grizzly Salvage on turn 2. Satyr Wayfinder's not so bad. The problem with Wayfinder is you're putting cards into your graveyard at sorcery speed, which makes it a little bit more awkward if there's a Scavenging Ooze. Whereas, like, let's say hypothetically, if he had Grizzly Salvage and you hold that up, an Ooze gets played, maybe you can go kill the Ooze and then not expose that Parhelion in the graveyard to the Ooze. But that being said, Parhelion is a good hit, assuming there is no Scavenging Ooze or Rest in Peace here. So we'll have to see what Robert has.
Yeah, and taking a little peek at Robert's hand, I don't see anything flipped to the front. I do see a Thalia Heretic Cathar, which is a back-breaking card. We can pull this one up real quick. This one's great against mono green, but also really good against Greasefang. So it's going to make all creatures and all non-basic lands ETB tapped. So what that's going to mean here is that Mason's going to have a really hard time in his deck, which I believe plays 1 basic. There's 1 swamp. It's going to be really hard to play the Greasefang here. And even when you do, the Greasefang's going to enter tapped. Tap there. My throat gave out for a second. Meaning we can't even crew the Parhelion the next turn. So it's going to be really hard for us to actually get the Parhelion stuff going. And it's one of those soft taxing cards, right, that we talked about in the sideboarding games.
Right, this is effectively a double time walk, right? Because if there's a tap land here for Mason, can't deploy the Greasefang this turn, deploys the Greasefang next turn, enters the battlefield tapped. Also, the really nice thing about Thalia, now I did mention that I wasn't a big fan of the Skyclave apparitions in the postboard games. That being said, it is really good with Thalia because Thalia making the Greasefang come into play tapped means that your Skyclave apparition has meaningful value, getting the Greasefang before the boat gets to get crewed, or the Parhelion in this case.
Yeah, and this Elite Spellbinder might be brutal because if we don't have a way to answer the Thalia, it's going to be forever before we actually get to resolve something like Greasefang if we only have 1 in hand. Looks like we have 2 Wayfinder, 2 Abrupt Decay, a Liliana, and something else.
Yeah, 2 Abrupt Decays is good for Mason here, because even if Robert takes one, you can still just go end of turn, cast the other one, target the Thalia, untap, peel a Greasefang off the top, and that's probably all she wrote. Which is why you see Robert taking the Chariot, which I do think that makes sense, because if you take Decay, like let's say you take Decay, then you just go end of turn, cast the other Decay, target the Thalia. If you rip a land, then you can play the Chariot. So yeah, I think taking the Chariot just makes sense there.
Yeah, I agree. And we do see how, this Thalia is doing some good work here, and it's kind of led to some awkward plays for Mason.
Let's see if we got a Greasefang. That is another Abrupt Decay, I think. Yeah, looks like another decay.
Yeah.
So now I guess you can go Wayfinder, hit a land, hold up Abrupt Decay, which is a pretty good sequence.
Yeah, that seems like a strong one. Puts, a good amount of stuff in your graveyard. Maybe you find a Can't Stay Away set up for that on the following turns. Heck, maybe you go
Downs.
Wayfinder. I love the beatdowns. Gotta keep them honest. This is like a funny example of it, but it is one of the nice things about Greasefang in some matchups where you have stuff like this that just kind of incidentally chips them down, and your opponent sort of tax into always having to have something else. They die immediately to Greasefang.
Right, exactly. Just like these, these mediocre beats, as the kids say, they end up, once you add up a whole bunch of them, they become a little less mediocre. So we do see an untapped land here being taken for Mason. Now the question is, do you play the third Wayfinder, or do you hold up the Decay? Kind of close. I feel like I don't hate just playing the Wayfinder here, because you do eventually want to get to 6 mana for that Chariot.
Yeah, you want to get to the 6 mana, and you also just want to maybe find Can't Stay Away in the 5th land for it.
It's a good point.
Huh.
Actually, is that that Midnight Hunt-ish card at the very, very top? That might be a Can't Stay Away, right?
It might be. Yeah, oh yeah, because it's the black and white.
I think it is.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense looking at the deck list over here too. I don't see any other thing it really could be. So yeah, so we might just have it. So finding this 5th land is super important.
I believe it was a Blooming Marsh, though, which is not exactly the land you're looking for on land number 5, but
that one is brutal. Looks like Robert has a Reflector Mage in hand and also has Outland Liberator. All right, so we're going to have at least one shot of protection through a Parhelion or something like that.
Yeah, Liberator is decent, but it only buys you 1 turn, right? Because you Liberator the Parhelion, goes to the graveyard, and then you can just run it back the next turn. So it's less of a permanent answer and more of just like not dying on the spot. But it looks like Mason picked up a Concealed Courtyard, so I believe has 2 enters the battlefield tap land, so can't even go for the Can't Stay Away this turn. That's kind of brutal.
Yeah, it is really brutal. Maybe Mason is going to be able to line up this Abrupt Decay now, though, and take this time to actually develop, making sure that Robert can't stop him from Parhealing, so that when we do Parhealing in a minute, it's actually very strong.
It's a good point. Yeah, you can just hold up the Decay, end step Decay, kill the Liberator, untap, and then Can't Stay Away and go from there.
Devin, we like this. Decay now, and then slam with our 3/1/1s. Let them, because if you do that, you have lethal to Parhelion.
17, 14. Parhelion's only 13, right?
Yeah, that was a quiz. I totally didn't forget how much damage Parhelion was. You passed, Devin. Congrats. You're back in the booth full time. Happy to have you.
Love to see it. We are going to pass here. I mean, if you're going to Decay, the thing is you can just maybe let this Liberator hit you and see if there's something that you'd rather Decay than the Liberator. So, like, I understand not main phase decaying. Like, maybe if there's something like I guess like a Thalia, Heretic Cathar or something like that, but
sure.
So Aspirant's going to go probably put a counter on the Spellbinder. You probably just let that happen because you have the setup here, so you just still just go end step Decay the Liberator, take 4, untap. Because once you get the first Parhelion hit in, I think that should be game.
Yeah, that's going to be just so much, and then you're also really close to playing the Chariot. Like, you have a tap land as your next turn, but 2 turns from now you get to get the Chariot on board, and then you actually like kind of stabilize pretty well. So I think this is just let the attack swing in.
It actually goes for the counter on the Liberator, which is pretty good for Mason. Just get a free 1/1 counter out of the deal because we were gonna kill that Liberator anyways.
Yeah, big get there for Mason. And it looks like Robert has some creature. Oh, it's a Werewolf Pack Leader. Okay.
All right. It's Greasefang time.
Yeah, and it's going to be a real test to see if Robert can survive after having this happen here. It looks like Mason's taking a second to think, do I want to Abrupt Decay now? Because my next couple turns are spoken for me, right? I'm going to Flashback, can't stay away, that's all my mana. Then I have this Chariot I kind of want to play. So maybe I want to, Abrupt Decay now just because I don't get a chance to again for multiple turns.
Yeah, because you have, like you said, you have your mana spoken for both of the next 2 turns. You're tapping out. So it does make sense to use it there.
Looks like we're going to do the deed.
Looks like that is Can't Stay Away. Confirmed.
Yeah. And now the Greasefang's back. The Okiba boss. She's ready to, Girl Queen go off. And Parhelion, pretty good when it comes back from the graveyard, believe it or not.
Not bad, especially when it has haste.
Yeah. Especially when it has haste. Yeah, and those angels too, just blocking the Spellbinder. Yikes. We're in a rough spot.
Robert, we're gonna need I'm trying to think of what Robert could even draw at this point. Looking at Robert's deck list realistically. It's nothing like a Declaration in Stone to clear the tokens. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it. I mean, there's a Reflector Mage, I think, in Robert's hands, so you can bounce one of the angel tokens. But, okay, so if you go second Reflector Mage, so you go Reflector and Angel, Reflector the Greasefang, counter on the Spellbinder to trade for the other angel. Yeah, you're so far behind though is the thing.
Yeah, I think you have to company into double Reflector Mage, like you said, and then draw another company that hits really well. But I don't even know what that looks like. But, your deck has a lot of creatures that can present a lot of power, so you maybe are able to actually cross the finish line. As we do see Robert here doing some counting,
there are 2 Reflector Mages.
Okay, I guess the problem here is less having the Reflector Mages and more than mana. It just doesn't line up perfectly with playing both of those.
Yeah. We can't cast them.
Yeah. We're also in this weird spot too where we can't attack with our Elite Spellbinder, else, we'll just dead. So we're having to kind of stall out against Greasefang, which is always an awkward position to be.
Right, and then the Parhelion's in hand for Mason, so if there's any way to bend that Parhelion, that would be lethal. The Sky Sovereign would also be lethal.
Mason Drew can't stay away. So if he has anything in the graveyard, that's now back available to him.
Yeah, the Informant. I feel like I might have seen a mill in Informant earlier, because that would be lethal. You can't stay with the Informant, discard the Parhelion. But
yeah, we'll have to see. Worst comes to worst, Mason has play a Seeker's Chariot, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's the worst you can do. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and we're 1 land away from just casting Parhelion too, which is, a pretty good place to be.
I've only cast that card once, and it did not work out very well for me.
I've played a good amount of the Dirty Fang, and so my results have varied, but it is not typically likely that you get to 8 mana and you're in a position where the Parhelion really matters. I think this is the rare occasion where you're kind of ahead enough that it does matter.
Yeah.
But rare they do be.
Yeah, what's Mason thinking about here? What do we got here? Attack, trade. Yeah, thinking about Taco Bell.
Yeah. Think about, I hope my friends went and got me some Chipotle. Yeah, it does look like the Seeker's Chariot's the main phase 2 here. And, a pretty good attack there from Mason. He just gets to force the block on the Elite Spellbinder. So now if there is some answer to the Angels, like another Reflector Mage, like that, Mason's not behind the 8 ball there. And it's got, a couple grizzly-looking cats come into play. Feral cats is what I call the wolf tokens when they fill in. I feel like
Reflector. Okay. I mean, we're not dead, but we're barely alive.
Yeah, we have to start drawing Collected Company. That just has to be our draw set for like multiple turns in a row, which is a thing the Coco deck gets to do. And getting to do that, even though it's unlikely, is a really strong place to be. We also have a Lair the Hydra in our hand, and we have a lot of mana, so we might be able to start chip-shotting in for a little bit and taking the game if we can like Coco, stabilize the board, and then sort of get across for exact lethal.
Oh, you know what? We might actually see what you described last turn. If we have an untapped land, Is it time?
I think the Parkelian's kind of nice. Also, you just get to crew and attack here pretty easily. And what's Robert
Yeah.
going to do? Eat your Chariot so that your Greasefang next turn brings it back? Like, probably, but it's not great. Like,
Yeah, you probably have to, because if you leave the Chariot in play, then you're also, not really beating the Chariot in the long game.
yeah, it's a real, like, I guess I'll do this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Robert kind of figures out a way to come back from this, because it's not, like we said, it is not 100% over. It's just really hard, and these are the make or break spots in the tournament. You win this round 4 against Mason, in the feature match, you figure out how to win this one, you're riding high and you are ready to go.
We're attacking with a Satyr Wayfinder. I'm assuming that means we're going to can't stay away that Wayfinder. It's pretty heads up play from Mason, so that must mean that there's no other good creatures that can't stay away, like no informants or anything like that. So yeah, wants to convert this can't stay away. I like that play.
Yeah, it's nice. It also helps set up that land for the Parkelian.
Yep.
And we hit multiple informants and an overgrown tomb.
Another Parkelian.
Ooh.
Yep, that's good. So doesn't have to worry about trying to discard the one in his hand.
Mm-hmm. And now we just get to play the Greasefang again. Oh, it looks like we're just going to can't stay away. The button. You know what you should do, Devin? Is hit that follow button on Twitch. While we're going through our graveyard and doing all these sort of things, you want to make sure to click that follow button, because we have got Paper Magic coming to you multiple times every month here on the Energy Circuit, and you're going to follow along and not want to miss any of that. So if you hit the follow button, you're getting email notification, all that good stuff. You'll see when we're live. You can come check out the games, as it looks like Mason decided to can't stay away back to the Funeral Informant and did discard the second Parkelian.
To see what Robert drew. It's got to be a Coco, right? There's almost nothing else. I mean, maybe Rest in Peace? Okay, all right.
That's a big one. It's so funny. Before I did the old Twitch follow, I was about to say Rest in Peace isn't good enough because the Parkelian can just get hard cast now. But we decided to go for the loot angle, and now I think we've got a game going, Devin, because we've got a lot of creatures, and those Reflector Mages are bigger than the Chariots now.
Well, don't we still have a Parkelian in hand to hardcast?
I thought we discarded it to the Looty, but I could be mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I was in full shill mode. I was doing the follow, like, subscribe, drop a Twitch Prime. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
But anyway,
all right. So 4 life, 5 blockers. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you can play a 2-mana or 2 power creature. So you have to tap a wolf and the creature you just played to crew the Chariots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attackers. 5 blockers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's only 2 damage getting through. So,
yeah.
Unless there's no. So what you can do is you can go play Chariot, get 4 power off of the Chariot, use the new 4 power to crew the Chariot. Then you have 3, 4, 8 attackers to 5 blockers. But that's not enough, right? Because you just block the non-Wayfinder, take 3, go to 1. Okay, yeah. So still not enough.
Yeah, I think we have to set up over multiple turns. Huh. I wonder. So I think we just legend ruled a Chariot. Unless we miscounted, which is totally in our range, But I wonder if you're supposed to attack with everything and just have the Chariot get eaten in combat and then play another Chariot. But maybe that's just worse. I don't know.
What Mason might be doing is just, I was going to say, maybe not attacking this turn and waiting, just generate as much power as possible and then shove next turn. Because I believe this is not quite lethal. I mean, the thing is, even if it's not lethal, you're going to eat most of Robert's board. So, like, realistically, how is Robert getting out of this anyways?
Yeah, Coco again, I guess, is the only answer. Yeah. Yeah, because you have so many, like, just keyword stinky creatures on the board with these Satyr Wayfinders that I think go all lethal next turn.
Right, yeah, because the 3 Wayfinders are going to get through. That's going to put Robert to 1. I would assume the Reflectors will eat 2 Wolves. The rest will probably chump block. Yeah, there's not going to be enough blockers here for Robert next turn.
Yeah, this makes sense. Just, getting your opponent essentially dead and forcing it to be Collected Company that hits, like, Deputy Detention, which non-open decklist tournament, not like it was last weekend at DreamHack Atlanta, where you would know exactly what to play around. So Mason's just kind of being like, all right, have it, have it or bust.
Yeah, I mean, even if it hits like you said, Deputy plus Reflector Mage or something, or like Deputy kill the Wolves, Deputy kill the Wayfinders, maybe you can make enough blockers, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think we're even playing it, so that's just like kind of
yeah, no Robert. Deputies.
Yeah. Might be an old take a draw step and pack them on up.
Well, unless the draw step's Coco. Actually, no, it can't be Coco because we chump blocked. Oh no, we have 4 lands. Okay, never mind. Because we chump blocked with all our elves, so we do 4 lands.
This is true. And...
Coco into Peacekeeper.
Okay.
Wait, he was at 1. He can't shock.
Ooh, I'm gonna need a judge down there. That is a game rules violation. Now, this might be Robert's first one of the day, so don't worry. Nothing to worry about too much there. But yeah, oof, we're gonna see game 3 here, and that was an exciting game 2 that looked to be kind of over for a second there. With Robert having that brutal start of Thalia Heretic Cathar into Elite Spellbinder, but Mason pounded through it, just didn't care, kept it going. Had a good amount of removal, made sure to line up the stuff correctly, and put himself in a position to win that game.
Yeah, and that was what we talked about. The texture of the post-board games are just so much different when you have the Abrupt Decays and the Fatal Pushes. There was, I think, 3 Abrupt Decays drawn in that game, and every single one of them was very crucial. One took out the Thalia, one was able to take out the Liberator, and, once you're able to break up because that's the thing, is a lot of the stuff that Robert is bringing to the table against the Greasefang deck is permanent-based. So just having the Abrupt Decays to, answer that stuff just changes the texture of the game so much in the post-board scenario.
100%. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see I don't know if anything's going to change really for game 3. I think both players kind of had a pretty good idea of what was coming, and they both kind of have sideboarded accordingly here. So we're probably going to get back to the match here pretty soon. But ultimately, this matchup is one that you have to be aware of. And if Roberts brought this Bant Company deck to the tournament, it's probably because he thinks this matchup is at least okay-ish. No one's, at least you're not typically bringing a deck that is just dead to Greasefang. It's always a good percentage of the room.
Right, and taking a look at Robert's deck list, I think he's going to have a more significant advantage on the play, especially, any Llanowar Elf deck is going to be better on the play. That's pretty obvious, but, if you look at the cards in his deck, like Spellbinder is a lot better on the play, stuff like Scavenging Ooze, you can go like turn 2 Ooze with activation up, turn 3 Collect a Company is a possibility. I think a lot of this matchup does come down to play versus draw. So now that Robert's going to be in the play, we'll have to see how the games play a little bit differently if they do.
Yeah, 100% here. Looks like our players are shuffling up and getting ready here, so we'll be down there in just 1 second. But yeah, I am excited to see, because this Bant Company deck is something that you always hear people talk about, like, oh, where's the Bant Company deck? That was always so good in Standard. Coco's such a strong card. Why haven't we seen something? And Robert has, I think, a pretty interesting take with doing things like putting Spell Queller on the sideboard and just being more of a proactive removal spell version in the main deck. Really kind of speaking more to Pioneer and less to kind of being a mimic of decks of old,
Yeah, I'm actually, the more I think about it, I'm wondering if it's matchups where Reflector Mage is bad. You just cut the Reflector Mages for the Spell Quellers. So against Control, maybe Rakdos, where you don't really want the Reflector Mages as much. So stuff like that maybe could be, that could be also the reason why the Spell Quellers are in the sideboard as well. Because I guess maybe Rakdos is a bad example because the Spell Quellers aren't the best against Rakdos, but yeah, I think that might just be, a situation where when Reflector's bad, Queller's good. There's never going to be a situation where both of them are bad.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You're always going to find somebody. It's just, who will you find? And then you have the rare, it's good against both half the deck. And it's like, oh no, not like this for the opponent. But yeah, it looks like Mason here taking them all again. Just trying to find, the right mix of lands and spells. And this is something, we see a lot in the new Mulligan era, and especially from decks like Greasefang, where they can afford to be down a couple of cards in order to have a more premium setup, even if it isn't the perfect one.
Yeah, noticeably, the Greasefang deck actually mulligans pretty well because of stuff like Satyr Wayfinder and Grizzly Salvage to kind of get the cards back. Like, those cards just effectively cantrip while also setting up your combo. So Greasefang is surprisingly a deck that I think mulligans pretty well.
By the way, we talked about the fabled Spell Queller Reflector Mage combo. I see Robert here has Spell Queller, and that's also much stronger on the play. I wonder if he sideboarded that back in.
Yeah, that also could be, Spell Queller a lot better on the play than versus the draw, so that would make a lot of sense. So what are these lands in play? Is that a Boseiju and a Takanuma?
Yeah, it is.
I think so.
And then
okay.
The other side is the Pathway, the blue-green one.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I was a little confused. Those they're a little darker than they normally look, so it's hard to tell. But
no, you're all good. Once again, that's why they hired me. Is I got my promo land game down. I was watching Ellen Bogan stream the Japanese RC last night. He didn't know Supreme Verdict. I came in chat. I was there to help. It's my goal. As we do mill over Greasefang, Abrupt Decay, and Rafine's Informant, if we have a Can't Stay Away, kind of a nice mill, if not kind of a disaster mill.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that Can't Stay Away would be fine, but we don't even have the we don't have a white source in play currently, or unless we take a white source off the Wayfinder, we might have, but we also don't have a vehicle in the graveyard, so got to be looking for that as well.
Yep. And Robert's on, hey, I've had nothing to do all game. I just kept a hand, nothing to think about. Pass the turn.
Yeah, the Bant Company deck is the best about, oh, whoops, I guess I don't have any plays. I just have 7 cards in my hand. It's your turn,
Yeah.
Nothing to see here.
My curve averages at about 5 when looking at it, and I had nothing to do the first 4 turns. Probably kept a reasonable hand. I would just play your cards and not worry about it personally.
Yeah, nothing going on here.
Nothing to see, nothing to do. How's your day going, Mason Grode? Just kind of got to warm up a little bit here. As we do see Mason taking a second to think, do I even want to cast anything? I do have the board advantage right now.
Kind of nice if there's a Grizzly Salvage too, because that one, you can go end of turn Grizzly Salvage. Maybe Robert fights over it, maybe he doesn't. But if he does, you can kind of untap and maybe resolve a spell through the Spell Queller. So
100%. And we do see Robert here tapping out for the Outland Liberator and passing the turn.
So yeah, definitely does not have a Coco. And we're going shields down on the Queller too, so
yeah,
could be maybe a risky spot here for Robert. There's the Parhelion. Let's see if we got a Greasefang.
We definitely picked up a Concealed Courtyard if worse comes to worse.
And noticeably, Mason shocked that Goblet Shrine in, so I would have to imagine there's likely a Fatal Push being cast here.
Yeah, or maybe we left up Abrupt Decay. Those are about the only 2 options that make sense. Looks like it was Fatal Push, though, and Robert's in a world of hurt as shields are down, and Mason, if he rips, the Can't Stay Away or the Greasefang, has got a pretty good position with the Parhelion in the graveyard.
That's it.
That's the foil Greasefang, and that one's a nice one.
Now, there is a Boseiju in Robert's hands, so can buy himself 1 turn. Parhelion comes into play, gets crewed, Boseiju the Parhelion. But I don't... So I guess you can Skyclave the Greasefang. Because I think Robert's hand is Skyclave, Spell Queller. I think it's double Skyclave, Spell Queller, and another Liberator.
Yeah, it looks to be about it. I think one of those might be a Brutal Cathar, but yeah, it is in a really bad spot because Mason's got that full hand going. And as we saw in game 2, Mason can just start playing the vehicles, playing a really normal game, and just sort of like win these drawn out games against Bant Company. And that's without Sky Sovereign ever being drawn.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. We haven't seen a Sky Sovereign in this matchup yet, and I assume when that hits the battlefield, things get a lot worse for Robert.
100%. Big draw step if you're a Robert fan. Looks like you picked up Werewolf Pack Leader.
Yeah, so we're going to Skyclave the Greasefang. I like that, because that way, even if the Skyclave dies, you don't get the Greasefang back, but I'm pretty sure I saw Can't Stay Away in Mason's hand.
Yeah, and that's going to be a problem.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
looks like it Can't Stay Away. Move the Greasefang to the top of the graveyard. And this one should be all she wrote.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's going to be one of those things, too, where Robert has some life left over, and we can't even Parhelion again, but we have 2 4/4 Angels left, and they stick around for forever.
Yep.
And this is one of the big strengths of the Abzan Greasefang deck that we have been seeing do so well in Pioneer at different various points and having a lot of adaptation. But it is a deck that kind of presents a really, really strong proactive game plan that is resilient. And when it does its thing, is almost insurmountable.
Right, it just has the ability to have starts like this, and as early as turn 3, you see the turn 2 Grizzly Salvage, turn 3 Greasefang. There's not a lot of decks that can beat those draws without very, very specific pieces of hate. So very similar to what Winota did before. It kind of puts you under the gun very, very quickly. Requires you to have very specific answers, and it does have some sort of a fail rate. But even with the fail rate, the deck can sometimes just cast Chariots and cast Boats, which is essentially what the Grode deck is doing. But it just has that kind of plan as well.
Yeah, and we also saw how good it is at playing like a game where your opponent has to strand mana in order to stop you, and some decks can't do that for forever. Like I think
Right.
Robert very reasonably held up Spell Queller on turn 3 for Greasefang. Made total sense. Robert drew an Outland Liberator, at the time had 4 lands, and thought this is a reasonable land thing to develop. I'll put my shields down for 1 turn, and that 1 turn has led to a cascading house of cards where Robert has been behind ever since.
Right, because that was the turn where Robert played the Liberator, I think, right? Liberator passed with 2 mana, decided not to hold up the Spell Queller. So maybe if you Spell Queller the Grizzly Salvage, maybe none of this ever happens if you just keep passing and passing and passing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's awkward, right? It gets to a point where Robert, it's like, well, how, if he's not hitting his land drops and not deploying any pressure, doesn't have Coco, how long can he really sit here and give, Mason the ability to develop? So it's tough. Yeah, there's you gotta think about it from both ways. So
yep, 100%. And Mason is gonna win this round 2-1 to progress to 4-0. We have an 8-round Pioneer 10K today, so Mason is in a good position to actually make a solid run at this, win some nice moolah, and get some NRG points, which is also super exciting. We're gonna have Mason join us here in the booth in a couple of minutes to have an interview. But first, Devin, what are your thoughts on Greasefang in the format right now? Because it is a deck that has a problem with the mono green matchup, but as we've kind of noticed today from coverage and looking at some results from the RC, is that a big a deal as we maybe thought it was a few weeks ago?
I not necessarily. The thing about the Greasefang versus mono green matchup, I think it's incredibly play draw dependent, because the green deck with Greasefang's fastest draws, the green deck doesn't have a ton of recourse against that. Like, yes, you have Karn, but Karn can't be deployed until turn 3 at the earliest. And if the Greasefang player's on the play and has the Grizzly Salvage into the turn 3 Greasefang start, that could be a problem for mono green. And the nice thing about that matchup is there's no interaction from the mono green side as well. So I think that Greasefang is in a pretty good spot as far as that matchup is concerned. But the thing about Greasefang, I think it's a little dicey against Phoenix and Rakdos, especially Phoenix, because Phoenix just gets to play Lightning Axe, which is probably Lightning Axe and Fiery Impulse, just has a ton of 1-mana ways to answer Greasefang that are non-conditional, unlike Rakdos, where you have to have a Revolt trigger for Fatal Push. So I think Greasefang is in an okay spot.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it is in a pretty good spot. And just, I don't know, as we talk about it and we mention the sort of oh, I get to play this, fair game with this oops, I win aspect to the deck as well. It's very appealing to see why people keep working on the deck and why it keeps iterating and keep changing. We saw people like Ashlyn Johnson here from the NRG circuit. She went and got her Pro Tour invite to her last week in DreamHack Atlanta. Congrats to her. And she was doing things like playing Silence in the sideboard, which is a pretty big innovation for the deck where, that allows it to hey, against mono green, they lose their turn against decks like Phoenix or whatever. You force them to have some sort of hard counterspell, else they won't do anything and they'll just die.
Right, yeah. Silence is a good way to fight through all of the Rending Volleys and Fiery Impulses and Lightning Axes, because those ones, they're a lot of the decks that have those really load up on them post board, so it's hard to kind of fight through them with discard spells like Duress and Thoughtseize. So just being able to if your opponent holds up 3 mana and they have 3 Lightning Axes in their hand and you silence them, they're dead. That's a pretty powerful way to just stop their entire hand. So yeah, it does make a lot of sense to play Silence.
Yeah, and and we're seeing I just looking over the deck list too. This one had Lauren's Escape in the sideboard, and that's a card that we didn't see last week at the RC at all. I haven't seen much talk about. So there's a lot of room to tailor your sort of Greasefang deck to what's going on in the metagame, how to sort of interact with what's going on there, and sort of just have the right answers to what people are doing. And I think having those things line up correctly is really a big part of success to the Greasefang deck.
Right, yeah. Just being able to try to figure out how you want to allocate your protection spells, like the Silences, the Lauren's Escapes, the green one that I can't quite remember, but Tamiyo Safekeeping is the other one. Yeah, Tamiyo Safekeeping. Mm-hmm. So how you want to, allocate those resources. And the other thing about the Greasefang deck is, we saw that matchup in particular. We talked about this a bunch. The texture of the games changed so drastically in postboard when you have bringing in all those removal spells. You get to play more of this fair interactive game. So, as people say a lot, Greasefang is kind of the best game 1 deck in the format. But you have to figure out a way to kind of navigate those post-board games as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I have to agree with that. And, we're going to have Mason here joining us in just 1 second. We're going to get to talk to him about his deck and sort of how his day is going. Like we mentioned, 4-0 now, a great start to our 8-round 10K. And let's see if we can hop on down to Mason real quick and see how he's doing. Yeah, it looks like we're gonna take 1 more second here just to make sure everything's working. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to him about this, and I think the deck's really good. And it's a really like exciting deck. But let's hop down to Mason. Enough of us talking about Greasefang. Let's hear it from the Mason who's doing well today. Mason, congratulations on being 4-0 at the Energy 10K. How are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
Nice. So, are you a Greasefang main? What main? Like, How do you get on Greasefang? How do you kind of get here going? How's the tournament going?
I am. It's going really well. I mean, just turned 3 Parhelion's pretty all right. I have not been playing Parhelion. I just started a couple days ago, so I'm happy. I was on blue-black control for a while, and that deck is terrible. So happy.
Well, I was gonna ask you what made you switch from the blue-black control, but I think you've already answered that question for us.
Yeah, I went 0-4 in Atlanta and decided never to touch that.
Well, Mason, I'm glad that there was some good thing to come out of Atlanta despite going 0-4 for you. That's really exciting. But you're talking about, you're just picking this deck up today. You're kind of liking it. What sort of did you have a friend that kind of gave you this deck list? Have you been working on it a bunch since Atlanta? What was the thing that drew you to this from blue-black control? Because I think they're very disparate strategies. I would not expect someone to jump from A to B like this.
Yeah, a teammate of mine was doing really well in Atlanta, and he was on Greasefang. He swore by it. So I was like, well, it can't be worse than blue-black. So I'll just play it through some leagues, see how it does. And it was doing all right. I tweaked his deck list. I didn't tell him that before I got here, so he's going to be upset with me. He wasn't playing Eldritch Evolution, but I think that card is fantastic. So
nice. Yeah, so you're a big fan of the Eldritch packages in this deck. That's something. So after playing today, do you think you want some more? I know we're still early in the tournament. You're 4-0. It's hard to mess with success like that. But is that something that maybe after this event you want to experiment playing more of, or
like how to change the deck or Eldritch Evolution specifically?
I mean, so Eldritch Evolution, I see you're playing 2 of it right now. After playing today, are you interested at all in playing 3 or 4, or is 2 kind of the most you feel like you can get away with?
2 feels fine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really only want to draw 1 a game, I feel like.
Awesome.
Talk to me about the Lauren's Escape in the sideboard. That's one that I haven't seen a lot. I know people usually lean more towards Tamiyo safekeeping. Was there like a specific reason you decided to go with that one instead of maybe more safekeepings, or what was the deal behind that?
Yeah, so actually I was originally playing 2 the Lauren's Escape, and I couldn't find a second one, so I just have a split. And okay. The Scry 1 I think is more important than Gain 2 for the most part. But my teammate disagreed with me. He said that white mana is hard to hold up while you play a Greasefang, and I can see both sides, but it's been good.
Makes total sense to me. Well, Mason, thank you for taking so much time out of your day in order to come and talk to us. It really means a lot. You have round 5 starting up pretty soon, so we're going to let you go ahead, go out, take a second, go breathe. Good luck in round 5. Hopefully we see you in a couple of rounds. As for you, the listeners, we're going to hop back into the booth here. We're going to take a moment, and we're going to take a quick little break as we set up our feature matches for you. So don't go away. Go grab your water, use the bathroom, do that sort of thing. Get excited. Click the follow button if you haven't already. That way you don't miss any of the coverage. And we'll be back in just about 2 minutes.